Hello and welcome to Cricket8 Podcast. I am Megha, joined by Jarrod Kimber. And today we are going to be discussing about the vacancy that has existed for a couple of weeks now, and that is for England's wide ball coach. Not a lot of contenders, at least at the moment, that we can discuss about, but why and how many is what we'd be discussing about at the moment. Jared, let's begin with the contenders that we know of that exist as of now.
Okay. It's hard to tell who really is a contender. There used to be this running joke that there was, I'm not going to name the person, but there was a particular person in cricket who would apply for every single coaching job. And so quite often, like it would be, it didn't matter if it was head coach of India or the head coach of Afghanistan or anything else. This person would quite often be mentioned in all the news articles because they applied for every single job. And it seems like we haven't quite got to that stage yet of finding it out or anything. So I always say that it's not, and this isn't the person I mentioned, but this is another person. It's not really a major cricket job, Megha, until Tom Moody has applied. And so once Tom Moody has been rumored to be interested in the role, then we really know that they're looking at it. But I think as we currently stand, we know that Freddie Flintoff is vaguely interested in the position. And certainly someone is interested in Freddie Flintoff. Kumar Sangakkara has been linked as well. There have been reports about people like Jonathan Trott. We don't really know how much that is that just Jonathan Trott was doing good at Afghanistan, or he had done some work with the ECB before. So those are the three major ones. And then there's quite a few other names that sort of pop up here and there at times. But because we haven't gone that far down, it's quite interesting. England have really done this a lot slower and a lot more specifically than maybe they thought they would have. I assume, Megha, what happened was they decided to get rid of Matthew Mott, but they didn't have a clear plan of what the next step was. But at the moment, the three big name players are certainly the ones who look like they are most likely to get a chance of coaching England next.
And Brendan McCullum certainly isn't interested because there's already so much on his plate with the test team alone and a busy test calendar too. But again, looking at it from the point of view of what coaching, international coaching in future is going to look like, there wouldn't be as many people interested with the leaks mushrooming left, right, and center, and the jobs up for grabs, the flexibility that comes with it. Rob Key, in fact, mentioned that he would allow the coach to actually also pursue opportunities at the IPL, which is a big thing to say because it's not unlikely that some or the other tour, if not it overlaps, would be very close to, say, the conclusion of the IPL or very close to the start of the IPL, and then things get complicated if you allow your coach to pursue other opportunities.
So Australia, I think Australia were the first team to do this with Andrew McDonald. It kind of makes sense in some ways as well. If you look at the fact that there isn't a lot of international cricket played at that time, and also it allows your coaches to be there watching all the other teams and learning strengths and weaknesses of the opposition, strengths and weaknesses of your players, potentially new tactics and all sorts of things, right? So there's lots of different advantages to that. And if you go and look at international basketball, for instance, you will find that most international basketball coaches probably coach a team, right? And now there's a lot less international basketball than there is cricket. But my guess is that might be the hybrid model in the future, that you have someone who is the head coach, but also has a role in one or two franchises. And it's how you manage that, right? And again, if you have all three jobs like Gautam Gambhir does, it's impossible to be able to do that. But if you have just a white ball coach, it's a little bit different. And I think there is a natural flexibility there available to those sorts of things. So I can see that. It might upset people, but I think it briefly upset people in Australia and then they forgot about it. So it'll be interesting to see. English media is much better at sort of keeping those things front and center. So perhaps every time the new coach loses, that will be mentioned as the reason why, and when they win, it will be completely ignored. So look, I do think there is an element of that as well, but that I think it's just a world that we're moving into, Megha. And also, the England coaches It's not quite the same as the others. So I think you can probably get paid as much to coach the England white ball team as you can an IPL team at the moment, right? But at the same time, if you're coaching an IPL team and you're in a good position, and we don't know what exactly Rob Key's thoughts are with this specifically, but if you are in coaching an IPL team and you're in a good position, even if you lose the head coaching job, chances are you might end up working for that franchise or doing some other work or working for other major franchises in the world. Your future is very secure. It feels like in international cricket at the moment, that's not quite the case. We see lots of very good international coaches coach for a little while and then really struggle to pick up another job afterwards. So there's more security, it seems, in the franchise model at the moment.
Yeah.
And that does depend on who you are and everything. But certainly at the top end of the franchise model. So again, it makes sense. But I think the best international coaches are probably going to be people who want to coach the international team, but still have an eye on everything that's happening domestically. And if the best way of doing that is probably having at least one other job available to you. But I can also see why hardcore England fans or Australian fans or anything like that are thinking, wait a minute, our team has to be the most important team here. And if that's not the case,
Absolutely.
there's an issue.
That's true. And just looking at what people thus far have said, the potential candidates have said. So Tom Moody said that he's not really not taking interest in it, although he's not expressed that he's absolutely interested in it, considering how somehow, despite his efforts, things have not happened for him when it comes to coaching international teams, getting those gigs. He coached Sri Lanka a decade and a half back, but subsequently tried multiple times for India, didn't just work out for him. Apart from that, Flintoff said that at the moment the international commitment might not interest him as much because there's also the 100 assignment that he has. Apart from that, the media commitments that he has to discharge, and other former cricketers as well, mentioning Ricky Ponting included, that for him as well there are media commitments and then other franchise gigs that at the moment are ensuring that there's enough on his plate. And all of these cricketers would be in the age bracket of 40, 50, and if we extend it further, say 60, and they would also have their families to take care of. So unlike India case, which is very different, 3.5 years of commitment and a coach across the formats. In England, at least, it's just two formats that we are talking about. So that is an important consideration. And beyond that, there's some other candidates as well that people here in the comment section are proposing. Dex says that he thinks New England coach should be Alan Lamb.
I
Mudassir Sheikh.
think that one's a joke.
Yeah, and then
But Alan Lamb was a very good player in the 80s, but he would be an extraordinarily weird decision here.
you can expect England to be quirky with their decisions. There's another point to it as well. It's also important to factor in the starting point. For example, when Brendan McCullum took over the test coaching job, the starting point was really low for England. So the only way forward or the only way ahead was up. So that was relatively easier as compared to, say, for an England white ball coach, though the starting point at the moment is low because they didn't fare well, defended horribly last season, last World Cup 2023 ODI World Cup. They struggled, won just 3 games. And then in the T20 World Cup as well, they were struggling, barring against the relatively lower ranked teams. They struggled and then lost to India comprehensively in the semis. So considering all of that, but also the fact that they won the title in 2019, there was sort of resurgence that happened. So the comparisons would be with 2019 and all that preceded 2019 than, say, what has happened now. So the expectations remain all-time high for the England coach. And with Rahul Dravid joining RR, that's what the reports say, Sangakkara is another contender that is being considered.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware at the moment, and there isn't so much reporting on this, but having had chats with people, Sangakkara is going to be coaching RR next year. I could be wrong, and Rahul Dravid could take that position. But as far as I'm aware at the moment, it feels like Sangakkara is doing that. So that doesn't mean that Rahul Dravid won't come in at a very important position in Rajasthan Royals, of course. And it doesn't also mean that Sangakkara might go, I live in England now. Maybe I don't want to coach in the IPL anymore. I want to do something in England, which is also fair enough. So yeah, I do think there is an element of that there. Look, it's a weird situation. No one wanted the England Red Bull coaching job. It's interesting that you're right that the only way is up, but people weren't looking at it that way. It wasn't particularly a sexy job. There's a lot of money, but other than Brendan McCullum, and if I don't know how many people know this, Brendan McCullum wasn't really asked to be the England Red Bull coach. He was actually asked to be the white ball coach. And he was like, no, I want to do Test cricket, which shocked kind of everyone at the time. And then Matthew Mott came in, largely because Brendan McCullum said, this is the guy that should be running the white ball team. We're in a different situation now. As you said, they've been disappointing in 2 World Cups in a row. They sort of got through to the last World Cup semi-final, but I don't think anyone would say they're in the top 4 sides in that tournament at that stage. And if you look at the future at the moment, it's a bit murky. There's no obvious answers if you're a coach. Like the McCullum thing, I think is quite interesting because looking back, it's like it kind of makes sense to do what McCullum did with Bazball, because that will be another nice joke one here from Anders of Alan Malala. Let's get all the Allens. How many different Allens can we get to coach England? But yeah, so I do think it's a little bit different from that point of view of now. I don't think there's an obvious answer in the way that perhaps there was before. And quite often, these are things that are easier to see in hindsight. No one really saw Bazball working, right? And if you go back to that 2015 situation when England reformed their cricket, even though I think a lot of us thought some of their better players were not in the side in the 2015 World Cup, and even though some of us thought that there were some really good players who just weren't doing it for England, that we thought they were going to suddenly revolutionize themselves. So perhaps there's a coach out there that looks at this and says, this is what I will do and this is why it will work. And that will be the person who will distinguish themselves. But it's not as obvious a position. It's probably more a position, like if you look at the names that we've talked about so far. So who did we go through? We went through
Flintoff,
Kumar, Trott with the 3. Who are the other ones? Owen Morgan, Mike Hussey have also been mentioned. This is interesting because these are all A-level players, right? These are all like world-class, world-famous level players. Like, who's the worst player on that list? Like Trott, and he's a fantastic player, right? So, at the moment, is that where they're going with it? And you know how I feel about this with the Gautam Gambhir situation. That always makes me nervous when you're only looking at great former players, because you should be looking at great coaches. But then the next thing is what are they actually looking for? What kind of coach are they looking for? Because Matthew Mott was brought in to just keep the system working, right? And then he came in and through no fault of his own, me and Rob completely disagree here. Through no fault of his own, from my perspective, that team just got really crap, right? Certain players aged out. Certain players couldn't do the roles that they used to do. And that next generation didn't take over. And because of that, and then you got Joffre's injury, of course, as well, which played a huge part. And so Matthew Mott suddenly was there to just make sure that all the boxes were ticked. And sadly, there were no boxes for him left to tick, right? So it's a very, very different situation, I think, at that point. So what's the coach now? It's a bit of a rebuild. They have to think of things very differently. So I think it's very interesting from that point of view. But my worry is when I only see famous cricketers here, and let's have a look. Flintoff has barely started coaching. Owen Morgan has not started coaching yet. So you've got 2 of the 5 names that aren't even coaches at all. It kind of feels a little bit like they just want a name to go in. The other issue I would have if I was a coach, right? So let's say you are, I'm trying to think of let's say you're Owen Morgan or Jonathan Trott or Mike Hussey. And you go in with a really, really strict idea of what you want to have happen. Right, we're going to do this, 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 and this. This is why it's going to work. This is how we're going to take things forward. I'm not sure how much longer Brendan McCullum will be there. I'm not sure how much longer Rob Key will be there. So there's a very big chance that you take this job on and you start the rebuild and the general manager changes. I think all of these things are playing a part in why it maybe isn't as easy to find a coach for England right at the moment as it normally would be. Having said that, Megha, they are going to, if you're an England coach, you are incredibly well paid, and it does help with your overall profile. So what you might get is maybe that top 5 list they're looking at the moment maybe isn't as interested. It's the next 5 under that I'd be much more keen to know what the plan is. But it doesn't seem to be the direction they're going at the moment.
So you talked about how it helps the profile. Let's take Matthew Mott's example. Was considered as a serial title winner,
Hmm.
trophy magnet, and then came the England team, won the T20 World Cup with them, and the stakes rose further. But what happened subsequently, what light would he be viewed in now? So, for people who are at the helm taking decisions, say for IPL franchises, the 100 franchises there, what do they view his coaching tenure thus far as? How would they look at it?
What percentage of cricket fans do you think beforehand, Mega, actually knew who Matthew Mott was? Right, so he's gone from maybe 1% of
Yeah,
cricket fans knowing what his name is, and I'm being
yeah,
very, very
popularity,
friendly there,
certainly.
to probably the 3 to 5% of cricket fans knowing his name, right? That also includes cricket administrators. That also includes IPL owners and franchise owners from around the world. Matthew Mott has now won World Cups with the Australian women's team and the England
Yeah,
men's team, and because of that, he's in a much better position. He basically will be able to coach for the rest of his life. He might not always be at the top level, right? But like, if even if he wanted to retire and start coaching some posh English school or some big school back in Australia, he's probably going to get that gig, right? And so it does matter and it does help, and that's that. But that's not going to help Jonathan Trott or Kumar Sangakkara, or that level of person.
yeah,
But those sort of professional coaches. So, within, there's a couple out there that are quite interesting. Ryan Tenduskarta is potentially a future head coach, right? We know he's now working with the Indian team. James
yeah,
Foster is another really interesting one, the former England wicketkeeper, who's probably worked with every franchise that has ever existed in the last 3 years to put himself in a position to be able to do that. And, someone like Andrew McDonald and Matthew Mott were the guys before that. Mike Hesson, right, was another guy like that, right? So it does actually help those guys. It doesn't really help Kumar Sangakkara, right? Like, coaching England probably doesn't help him unless he wants to coach in England. So that's the thing I'm more interested in here, as that sort of that level below of where they go next and how it goes. But it's a fascinating one, because it's, in some ways, it would have been a dream job to take over when Matthew Mott was there, or when Matthew Mott got the
yeah.
job, and now it's more of a, like, if I was interviewing for this at the moment, I'd be really, really careful the way I asked the questions. I don't even think I would interview them based on their previous history. I'd be like, right now, what is your vision for the England white ball teams? Right? And I want to know that before anything. I don't care if they played cricket internationally or whatever. What is your vision? What is there that you think you can change straight away? That's the most interesting question that you could ask any of these people. And that's why it doesn't matter to me whether it's a great former player or not. It's someone who has that vision. And that's essentially what McCullum did for the Red Ball team.
Hmm. So you raise the question, what would be the answers that would appeal to you? Because hypothetically, at the moment, we're assuming that you're the one interviewing.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's a terrible state of affairs for English cricket, and I apologise to everyone involved. No, I think, yeah. So I'd be asking that question, and I would be looking for someone. So uh, when I talk to coaches, so I've briefly been involved with two different searches for coaches. Actually, three different searches for coaches. My first thing is, well, how much do they know of the team? And that doesn't mean they have to be an expert, but what they do have to be is someone who has a real view on what the team can be, right? As in, they want to come in. And so I remember talking to one coach, and he was like, I want this to be a team that has a lot of spin and a lot of batting down the order. So that was his thing. And he's like, we're set up in this way. So this bit, everything else is kind of covered. But if we can cover these two parts as well, I think for the league we're in and the situation we're in, and I was like, that's exactly the kind of coach that I want to work with, because that's aligning with my idea. So straight away, I'm like, I could see how that works with our team. And then I talked to another coach who was like, we need a bunch of anchors because we've got a bunch of big hitters in this side already. And I was like, well, that's not the team that I think is the future, right? So England has to work out what this is. England has a lot of guys who are really good at smacking pace, right? Is there a coach who can work out how to unlock them scoring against spin again, like they used to when they were really good, right? And is there a coach who can say, do you know what? I don't think there is another great spinner coming through. I don't think there is another Adil Rashid after Adil Rashid, and I don't know who our second best spinner is. So we're going to go all in on pace bowling, and here's why we're going to go in all at the moment. I'd be like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe that is something that we could do. So it's kind of, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone who's going to come in and say, this is the theory, this is why I believe the theory will work, and this is how it matches the players that we have available at the moment. This is what I want to do. You need that kind of strong vision. Now, these things obviously go horribly wrong, Megha, right? They can fall apart absolutely completely. But I don't think just coming in and going, oh, I'm a coach and I like to coach players and, I help. This what England need is someone with a vision for the reconstruction of this team. And that is what I would be looking for.
Jarrod, you've talked about so much without really divulging the names, and that has left us all wondering whose vision could be the visions that you just shared. But do you think social media popularity, I mean, popularity in general, Twitter numbers, Insta numbers, do they play a role? Because we see a certain number of coaches being exchanged between franchises, be it the IPL, be it the other leagues around the world. And those who are, say, not as popular but have done well with whatever assignments they've had, them not getting a look in. So, does that play a role because you've been a part?
Less so probably with coaches. Weirdly enough, it does play a part with players at times.
Yeah.
I know of some players who've been picked for franchises on the back of Instagram followings and stuff like that. It's more to do with general fame, though, right? Than social media. We're probably not right at that period at the moment where the social media part is that important. There might be some smaller franchises.
Yeah.
So beneath the sort of IPL, PSL 100 level, right? There might be some smaller franchise leagues who occasionally are like, well, if we get this coach, we're going to get more press or we're going to get more social media interactions. But it's not as common as you would think. But what is common is, let's just go back to that list again. Like, look at all the players on that list. They are all very, very famous. And I think after the Matthew Mott situation, as far as I'm aware at the moment, and the ECB would be having meetings about this, and it might completely pivot. It does look like they're looking for a name, right? And outside of, there aren't many names in coaching at the moment of what would you call them? Famous coaches. So Mike Hesson is probably one. He's not massively famous, but within the cricket community, quite well known. Andrew McDonald is probably another one that you would have up there. Mickey Arthur would be the other one, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Am I missing any others that are known more
Really
for their
popular.
coaching? Yeah. So there aren't that many of those sorts of people out there. There aren't as many Bob Woolmer, Duncan Fletcher type
Yeah.
people out there as there were before. We've seen South Africa try people like Russell Domingo and some smaller coaches, Gary Stead, in
Gary
New
Stead,
Zealand, but they're not particularly well known, right? They're not very well respected or very talked about. So I do think from that point of view, you then have a situation where it is harder to work out who that next person is coming up. Like James Foster and Ryan Tenduskarta are two players that I know are perhaps on that kind of trajectory. Although it wouldn't even surprise me if Tenduskarta decided to be an assistant coach the rest of his life. Whereas I think James Foster definitely wants to be a head coach. But getting to that area, getting to that point is very hard. Like I never quite understood how Andrew McDonald suddenly became everyone's, favorite to be a coach. Like I know who Andrew McDonald is and I respected him quite a bit for a lot of the different things that he did. But I don't understand how he went from Andrew McDonald, the guy who played a handful of tests for Australia, to being Andrew McDonald, he might coach England, or he might coach India, or he might coach New Zealand, or he's going to coach Australia. Like sometimes it's hard. There might be another person out there that is like that, but it doesn't feel as obvious. Like Mickey Arthur's not going to get this job. Russell Domingo's not going to get this job. Mike Hesson is a possibility, I suppose, but there doesn't feel like there's as many people out there. But the big thing I would say, Megha, is that sometimes what happens is, especially with a cricket board like England, who, to be fair, generally are quite diligent with interviews and everything, you suddenly see this kind of rush of someone interviews really well from nowhere, right? And Matthew Mott's a good example of that. Brendan McCullum might have suggested Matthew Mott, but Matthew Mott got in that room and people from the ECB were like, whoa, yeah, great. That's exactly what we want. I don't think we're at that section yet. So we're at the section at the moment where it's like, Alan Mullally and Alan Lamb and whatever other famous player that you want to put in as a
Alan
do you know what I
Border,
mean? Alan
my
Border,
nomination.
all,
Says
all the,
Alan, yeah.
Alan Richardson, all the Allens, right? And so we're probably more at that section now of Ricky Ponting. I mean, you talked about Tom Moody before. Ricky Ponting's another one. It's like, when was the last time a coaching job came up and Ricky Ponting's name wasn't linked? Like, he's just automatically linked to these jobs. Ricky Ponting is like the anti-Tom Moody, where even if he doesn't want the job, his name is linked with it at the moment. So it's a really interesting time. But I think what will be interesting is when they get their final list of 6 or 7 people, when they start to interview, that's when the real rumors and the real interest will come out. And we're assuming that Flintoff is a chance because he's best friends with Rob Key, right? We need to get beyond that and really understand where it goes. But this is an issue with coaching, in that I still don't think we have enough strong coaches around the world, and because of that, there isn't really a great talent pool to be drawn from here. And it's not that there aren't great coaches around the world. It's that we don't talk enough about coaches in it. Like Phil Simmons would be my perfect example.
Yeah.
Right? Phil Simmons completely revolutionized Irish cricket, right? And got them to a level that they had not been to before. And everyone I've ever talked to about him from Ireland, was a huge fan. Then he went back to the West Indies and he got some success out of the West Indies and they won a World Cup, right? We know that Phil Simmons is without a doubt a great coach. Why is Phil Simmons not an IPL coach?
Yeah.
Right? Why is Phil Simmons not a consistently high-level franchise-level coach? And occasionally he is. Otis Gibson is another one who everyone, who's coached South Africa, who, was very much in the running for the England job, I think, at times as well. So there are coaches that it just doesn't make any sense. And then occasionally you just have a bolter like Matthew Mott, where you're just like, well, wait, where did he come from? Right? So I don't think there's a great structure of this at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is that there doesn't seem to be a very good path between assistant coaches and head coaches in cricket. And there seems to be this recycling. I think you talked about it before of, he's coached this franchise, so now he'll go to that franchise, or he's coached this international team, now he go to this one. There's a disconnect. And a lot of it is we don't really understand cricket coaching because it's very new to us as a national job. Like before Bob Simpson, really, cricket coaches didn't exist. And we're talking about the 80s, right?
The managers were the thing, yeah.
Yeah, you had a team manager who was there who occasionally
Logistics,
did some coaching, and then the captain did a lot of it. It's not really until the early 2000s that most global teams have a proper coach who is trained to be a coach and becomes a coach. And even now, you still get that sort of management role occasionally come in. So I don't think we understand it. And it makes it actually quite hard for these teams. So they've got 2 things, to go back to your point from before. They've got to deal with franchises who pay as much as them, right? And might be able to give multiple jobs that actually end up paying more. And then the other side of it is we don't really have, like Cricinfo doesn't have a page that says Matthew Mott's win percentage, right? So it's the whole Daniel Vittori thing of, like, Daniel Vittori went around the world getting coaching jobs, yet most of the franchises that he went with failed. Now, I don't think that was completely Daniel Vittori's fault, right? But we also don't know, no one was, I think Tim Wigmore was the first person to go and check his win-loss record, right? Yeah. Who are the winning coaches out there? Who are the successful coaches and who are the ones who are not? A lot of it is anecdotal or is narrative based. And again, that doesn't help you if you're England and you're looking for the next big coach.
Perception plays such a huge role. You've seen that with some of the IPL coaches. Didn't do well earlier, but the recent assignment, if that was a success, all the success of the team would then get attributed to that coach, and then he'd be in vogue for every other team to try and grab hold of. So now
or the opposite happens, right? Sometimes you have success as a coach. Oh, but it was the captain. Earlier. It was the captain who was the star in that one, so you don't get it. So it's a tough gig.
Yeah, depending on what narrative at the moment is building, that really ends up playing a massive role. Quickly dedicating our attention to some of the questions here. Mudassar says, who do you think ODI keeper will be of England after Butler Salt can keep wickets in T20s? Jamie Smith for ODIs. So your nominations were the same.
Well, Butler's not going anywhere for a while, I don't think. But yeah, I think Salt will probably take the gloves in T20. He's not a particularly good keeper, but he's certainly going to be a mainstay in the T20 side. And yeah, they might go Smith in the ODI. They might even have a chance of trying someone else out and having a couple of different keepers to see what their future is.
You know, Jarrod, just to get back to the point that I was making earlier, the perception thing, the social media, the role that it plays. For example, Ashish Nehra didn't have a great time with RCB. No coach had it. So don't think Ashish Nehra can be the one to be blamed. But with GT, the two successive runs the team had, including the title winning campaign, the first time around, second time finishing as the runners up. So there'd be so many memes with him holding a coconut water. I mean, with him holding coconut water, and how he changed the game just by sipping coconut water. Nothing fancy about him. So all of those things made for good memes, and that's why there was this time when he was being touted as the next Indian coach. He categorically didn't show interest in it, and then all those conversations died down, and that also got linked to the fact that this time around for 2024, Gujarat Titans didn't do as well. So just the thing around perception. So do we judge coaches right? Is the landscape so that the coaches like Bob Woolmer and Duncan Fletcher can mushroom? So, would the present scenario allow for such coaches to build their reputation, for them to have that sort of run? Because at the moment, even in terms of option, there is a lot of options floating around.
Mm.
Janil Mehta has a long comment here. He says, considering the next Champions Trophy and World T20 are in spinning conditions, England are supposed to struggle no matter who the coach is. So why this change? They should focus on 2027 ODI World Cup in South Africa, 2028 World T20 in Australia. Can you do that? Can you ignore the upcoming global tournaments?
This is the kind of thing, Jen Hill, that I think would be really interesting from the perception of the next candidate, because I'm kind of with you. I don't know how they solve the problems of bowling spin and batting against spin right now. Perhaps Joss Butler goes on a run, and they overcome some of that in another way that we haven't quite thought about at the moment. But they're not about to get a second world-class spinner behind Adil Rashid, and most other teams in the world that are good either have two world-class spinners or have other ways of covering it, like Australia with extra seam options. So I'm with you there. I think that's quite an interesting one. So that's what we're talking about. Imagine going into that meeting and going, look, I don't think there's anything you can do to be a genuine contender in the next World Cup or the next Champions Trophy. However, why don't we use it as experimental, and let's try some things that we haven't tried before and go all in and see how we end up. But actually, let's aim to win the 2027 and 2028 tournaments instead. That's the kind of theories and the kind of vision that you're looking for. Now, ECB might be like, I get it, but no, we have to be competitive right now. But if you're really retooling the side and having a reboot, which is pretty much what they've said, that's what you would do, right? You would say, okay, we're not going to win the next two tournaments, but let's try everything we can to get ourselves in a situation to win the next 4 tournaments after that. I think that's a perfectly acceptable thing. A method of going after it. The other way, Jenna, would you come in and you would say, okay, let's pick Rehan Ahmed, Tom Hartley, Liam Dawson, Adil Rashid, Liam Livingston, all in one side, and everyone's going to have to bowl this amount of overs. Adil Rashid's going to bowl 10. Everyone else is going to bowl, between 4 and 8 overs in any particular game. But we're going to bat down to number 9 and 10. Those are the kinds of visions they're looking for, I think, from a coaching. Well, I should say that's what I would be looking for. You give me the game plan of how you think we can win in the next 2 years, or how you think we can reboot for the next 2 years and then win the tournaments. I need to hear your views, and if they match up with what I want to do as a cricket board, then I'm going to hire you.
Rapid fire. Prateek Jha says Rob Barron. Rob and Jarrod would make a good combine.
That'll be terrible.
Jessica has another Allen that she is proposing as a coach.
I mean, to be fair, I'm trying to think who would be the most Alan Partridge coach in cricket. I'm trying to think of. It should have been. It was Shastri, wasn't it? It was probably Shastri was the most Alan Partridge of any cricket coach. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else coming through. If you don't know who Alan Partridge is, you get that, but you won't get that. But I think Shastri was probably the most Alan Partridge, the sort of person willing to say the most ridiculous thing possible with this straight to his face.
And then there's another name that Dhruma is suggesting here. Well, Partridge cannot be considered, but the name that she's suggesting can certainly be.
I don't know.
Selected,
Michael Vaughan might actually be more Partridge. He might be a double Partridge compared to Shastri. So I think ECB wise to move that one out. But look, it's.
But was he that individual as a captain? that he is
Uh,
now on social media as a pundit?
you know, I'm not particularly close to Michael Vaughan. You know, I've never spent that much time with him, but I know a lot of his very close friends and a lot of people who played with him. So I have the perception of him as a public figure, which, I'll be honest, it is a bit idiotic and crazy. And obviously, it's very funny that Yorkshire went. The whole Yorkshire racism scandal went to the point it was where it's like he's got
Yeah.
modern tweets that have racial connotations. You know, coming to London and saying no one speaks English in London anymore. Things like this. It's like he's a troubling figure quite clearly. So, with all that in mind, it's like it's very hard for me to say that he should be the next England coach. That said, people loved playing under him, right? And he had the ability of building teams and structures and everything else. I cannot imagine he would want to do this job, but I don't know what his financial situation is or anything else.
Interesting. I'm sorry, we have to conclude, but this probably is the most important comment that I can see at the moment. He says, Shera Tank says, Vaughan is too important for Twitter to waste his time on coaching. And that's a fair point. All right, then. Thank you so much for joining. Remember to follow us across the social media platforms. Twitter is very important for us as it is for everybody else. So, particularly on Twitter and across every other social media platform, Jarrod is very active. So, if you follow him, you'd get treasure troves of knowledge and wisdom that you can benefit from. As of now, thank you so much for joining. Bye bye, Jarrod. Bye to everyone.